And there we are. Hi, everyone. Don't you love live streaming? It is so much fun. Anything can happen. I'm Lisa Nirell, and it is Friday, December 4th, and this is the last month of the year, and what a year it has been. I just got back from the dentist today, so if any of you are wondering why my mouth looks a little odd, you'll know why. But trust me, I have not been drinking on the job today. I have a bit of sad news. I'm reflecting a little bit on this week. One of my favorite leaders of the decade passed away very tragically this week. Tony Hsieh, the founder of Zappos. I was perusing the pre-order copy of his book, Delivering Happiness, which I was one of his book review team members, and I will never forget meeting him in Henderson, Nevada at his headquarters. And when he wrote to me, he said, "Thank you for all of your energy and support." So Tony, you are greatly missed. You are a fantastic leader. And you believed in me when my first book came out and promoted my book globally to your followers. And I will be so grateful to you forever. So let's send a positive thought to Tony and his loved ones. But we must all carry on. And that's why I'm excited to carry on today with a leader who I also admire. He's going to be joining us from Atlanta, Amanda Setili. And Amanda and I are going to talk today about the 2020 winners and losers. And what does it really take to find opportunity in any economy? We've seen a lot of economic conditions swing back and forth throughout the last 9 months. And we're going to unpack some of the things we've learned and some of the organizations that we have found to really rise above the crowd. Amanda Setili is a kite surfer, an adventurer, a two-time author, a graduate of Harvard, and a strategy advisor to some of the world's greatest companies, including Home Depot, Delta Airlines, and Kimberly-Clark. We have collaborated on a number of fronts for the past decade. Of course, neither of us have aged whatsoever. And I am really thrilled that she's going to join us for the next 40 minutes to unpack the winners and losers of the year. Amanda, welcome.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Today, I am other than the dentist and the strange Novocaine impact, I feel terrific. And thank you for being here.
Well, you look good. No one would ever know if you hadn't told us so.
Thank you.
Only your dentist knows for sure.
Yeah, I had a great experience at the dentist today. How many times do you go to the dentist? And he came out and said, "Oh, here's your book. Would you sign it for me?"
Nice. Nice. That's awesome.
So you never really know the impact you're going to have on people and who.
Right.
Now, we had a lot of fun putting together today's topic, and I want to remind people that we're going to be taking questions today. So we're live streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as YouTube. So please remember, as you're watching, post your questions and tell us where you're from. Amanda, what did you come up with when you were thinking about the winners of 2020? What thoughts were going through your mind?
Well, some industries have been hit really, really hard, and other industries have actually been buoyed by this, uplifted by this. And so I don't really like to think of, or I kind of thought maybe we should almost rename the topic, because I don't feel like it's really winners and losers. I feel like it's, how can everybody win? Like, how can everybody turn this situation into the best that it possibly can be for them? And so an example would be Delta Airlines. I think they've done a really lovely job of communicating with their customers, keeping people safe, managing their employee base very effectively. And so I mean, their revenue is down tremendously, but they're building loyalty. So relative to their industry, I think they're doing a really good job. So would you say they're a loser? Would you say they're a winner? I would say that they're doing great considering the situation that we're all in. Just an example.
Yes, absolutely. And there are so many new ways that we can define winning organizations these days. You
Mhm.
know, when I grew up in sales and marketing, the definition of a winning company was really heavily focused on revenue growth.
Right.
And I think the pandemic was a kick in the ass for so many of us. Like, well, maybe there's more. Maybe we need to look at this a little more holistically. So, are there any other considerations or criteria that you think have come to the surface?
Well, even before the pandemic, you know, you were well aware of the Business Roundtable's statement last year that companies need to take all stakeholders into account, and that includes their employees, their communities, the world at large, their suppliers. And I think that's really the way to think about it is what are you doing for the world, and how should you measure that? And so if you're measuring yourself only on revenues and profitability, that may give you a very short-term view of what your impact on the world is. And, you know, I think back to, you know, decades ago, I think there was more of an ethic of creating jobs as just an inherently good thing. And now it's almost like you know, over the past 20 years or so, we've started to think reducing jobs is a good thing, which is sad, you know? I mean, I just hope that as automation and artificial intelligence take over a lot of the bland work, you know, kind of boring work, that there's lots more opportunity for creativity in the world. And I'm just seeing kind of a blossoming, especially of the younger generation of people being entrepreneurs when they're only 22 years old or 15 years old and starting something new that really fits them, that really works for them. And we've just got such a robust gig economy now that I think we're in a time of immense change that'll be really interesting to live through.
Yes, most definitely. Have you ever seen lately any examples of clients? I mean, you've advised so many great companies over the years in your work at Setili Consulting and also with McKinsey. Have you worked with any clients lately who maybe saw their sales flatline, but yet they were able to really pick up some great customers or employees during the pandemic to position them for growth?
Yeah, I mean, example, for instance, is in the financial services industry, they're not growing because transactions may not be growing, but you know, customer service representatives, just as a really simple example. You used to kind of have to have these centers where everybody worked and they were supervised by people on site. And now, of course, we all had to be sent home within 2 weeks. And so everyone has adapted to that. How do you keep this technology secure? How do you coach people? How do you keep them motivated when they're remote? And we've learned a lot. And one of the things that I think has been a big benefit is now, you know, it used to be hard to find people to hire for some of those jobs. Now you've just able to cast a much wider net. You can hire people in small towns. You can hire people who don't have the technology, but you can ship it to them and have them set it up in a very short period of time. So you've really enabled companies to hire a lot more different kinds of people in different locales. And I think it's going to be a boon for small towns, don't you? I mean, small towns
Definitely.
shrink for many, many years. And now I'm seeing them growing, which is just awesome because every time I move to a small town, which I've actually only done a couple times in my life, I'm so pleasantly surprised. I'm like, wow, this is really great. What was I doing living in the city for so many years? So anyway, I just think that's going to be a side benefit to society in general.
Yes, and my nephew is a shining example. He's working remotely right now for a company, and he was in very close to Denver, Colorado. And he and his fiance said, well, wait a second, we're passionate about scuba diving, and we're really kind of tired of these very cold winters. So they just got up and moved to Florida. And they said, you know, They're working remotely. She's a certified financial planner, and they're still thriving and getting outdoors on the weekends
Yeah, there's so many great
and
examples.
evenings. Most definitely. It does create a great deal of emotional freedom and lifestyle freedom.
Right.
Yes. What else? What else are you seeing?
Well, just in terms that just reminds me of something else that I'm seeing, which is I think people are enjoying nature way more this year than in the past. Just when I watch Facebook feeds or whatever, just so many people are just enjoying a simple walk in the park, a simple run outdoors or a bike ride, or just anything getting outdoors is just, I think, so much more of a, I don't know. I just see people spending a lot more time outdoors, and I think that's fantastic. We miss,
Well,
we miss people, though, don't we? I do. I
miss people. I know. I mean, a year ago, who would have thought that I would be so excited about my Zoom dates?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I'm thankful for them. I'm thankful to be able to spend time on Zoom every day.
yes, definitely. Speaking of outside, we have seen a surge of revenues with organizations like Home Depot and Tractor Supply.
Yep.
And Lowe's. Have you been watching that category? Because I know you spoke in depth in both of your books, I think, about Home Depot. I mean, one of my favorite is the Agility Advantage, in which you do describe some of the trends in retailing.
Well, both of those companies have benefited from the fact that people are spending more time at home, and you not only have more time to do projects, but you notice stuff more. So you're like, oh, I didn't really realize that I made a hole in that wall like 6 years ago and I never repaired it. Or, boy, this lighting isn't good for Zoom, so I need more lighting. Or, just I'd love to paint my room or whatever. So that whole sector has surged, and I think their comp store sales were up like 22% or something last quarter. Home Depot had a really good quarter. Tractor Supply has really impressed me. It wasn't really even on my radar until this pandemic started. And I got really interested in trying to do some organic gardening. And this was at the very beginning of the pandemic. And they weren't initially set up to do buy online, pick up in store. Well, they figured it out quick. And it wasn't perfect. It was kind of kludgy, and but you tolerate it because the customer had a high incentive to do contactless buying, right? And so you were willing to kind of tolerate some imperfection at first, and you knew that they would work through it. And so it was really like a golden opportunity for a lot of companies to drive digital adoption in ways that will benefit them forever. Another example is Comcast. They had to figure out quickly, how could you get cable or internet set up without someone coming into your house? And so they figured out how to kit the equipment. The technician would drop it off at the house. They might even wait outside and FaceTime with the person for 30 minutes while the person set it up, make sure they could get it set up, make a really clear instruction. And so they're kind of training the customer to do digital self-service that the customer might not have been willing to go through a year ago. Now they are. I think it's really a permanent change in our behavior that's going to stick.
Yes, one of my favorite sayings is you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And another I just love to watch and track what's going on in the restaurant or in the restaurant categories as well. And I want to give a shout out to a number of restaurants who have really pivoted and shifted very quickly. I mean, I love the Panera Bread story, where they saw an unmet customer need, which was people couldn't find certain basics at the store, like bread and milk. And they decided, well, we have some surplus from some of the orders we placed for our individual restaurant locations. Why don't we just set something up on our website or our app, so if you need sundries, you can pick them up when you pick up your takeout. And it drove it drove revenues for them an additional 2%. And,
Wow.
they did this in a matter of a few weeks.
And that's what I think has changed us all from this pandemic is we used to just tolerate slowness and we figured stuff just had to take a long time. Well, now the whole world got a big fat lesson in how fast we can change if we really need to. So that's like for our entire cohort from, age 10 through age 90, we've learned something really quickly that we can apply for the rest of our lives. And I think it's really going to change the way we think about agility, change the way we think about change and innovation, and it'll be a really positive thing.
Well, so far it's positive in a lot of ways. I also look in, I live in association headquarters of the world here up in Northern Virginia. And I really get encouraged when I see associations making changes quickly. And some of them have, in my mind, become real winners during the pandemic. Have you, you might have heard, it's hard to miss if you watch Food Network or some of the cable channels, when Guy Fieri teamed up with the National Restaurant Association.
I didn't know about that. I love to cook, but I don't watch cooking shows.
Yeah. Well, I really love what he did. And this, we started to hear about this as early as late March, early April. And Guy Fieri teamed up with the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation. And what they did is they immediately set up grants for restaurant workers who were losing their jobs. And they ended up giving 43,000 grants to restaurant workers very quickly, valued at each one averaged $500, but they raised over $22 million for the restaurant workers. And think of all the workers who either are permanently going to be out of work until the vaccines really kick in.
Yeah.
Or they need that money to just either cover their basics or retool.
Right. Right.
So I hats off to Guy for what he did. That's pretty major. 22 million in like 3 months.
Amazing.
It is amazing. I also want to remind people, we are glad you're here and you can ask us questions. We'll make sure to get to as many as possible. We have Camila joining us from Sweden today. So we have some folks from Sweden, and I know we've got Jeff from New York and a few other people joining. So we're happy you're here. And what other organizations do you think we can learn from that, and what did they do that can be replicated, Amanda?
Well, I think Southwest Airlines is actually another really interesting example, because in normal times, it's quite hard for an airline to expand their network because you've got to get gates, and gates are a scarce commodity. And if they're all tied up, you can't get in, right? So you may not be able to expand into a certain airport if you can't get the gates. Well, suddenly there's some gates available because capacity is way down. And so they're expanding, they're taking advantage of this time to expand. So I think I'm seeing this in other industries as well, where your competitor may be pulling back and that leaves a gap for you to fill. Companies that I'm working with are really gaining share in that way. They're not only gaining share by calling customers that maybe the competitor doesn't have time to call on anymore because they've laid off part of their sales force in a very cost-focused way, or they're picking up talent that wouldn't have been available last year. So I think that it's a really interesting time to gain market share in a way that will benefit you. Once the pandemic is over, those customers, that talent is going to still be with you. Your competitor is going to try to come back, but they're going to be coming back from a weaker position. So those are a couple of examples.
Yeah, and speaking of learning, higher education, what can we say about it? I mean, winners, losers, where do we put, and where do you see higher education falling in the spectrum in their ability to adapt and retool?
Well, I think that higher education was already in jeopardy even before because remote learning was, easy to get. The cost had been increasing way out of line with inflation for many years. There was kind of an arms race among the universities to have the best buildings, the best students, everything the best, which caused a real increase in costs. And I think parents were, and people, just students were more and more questioning the value. So I think there was already a lot of tension in the industry of which way is this going to go. I think what will happen is the industry will sort of splinter. Some universities will really innovate. They'll come up with really dramatically new ways to serve people from all over the world. For instance, they may innovate that they're going to be very, very strong in one particular field and not worry so much about the other ones. They'll have some niche majors that will attract people from all over. They'll get much, much better at proving the return on investment to their students. And they'll have to work hard to do that. I mean, they will have to work hard on making sure the right companies are recruiting there, that they're building the right skills in their students that are going to be sought after by those companies. So I think it will force actually sort of a health, what's the word, like a healthifying. I think the industry will become more healthy as a result of this.
I think we should make a new word, healthification. The healthification of higher education. That sounds like a rap song, doesn't it?
It does. I'm a little worried about the small liberal arts colleges because they were the most under pressure before. And one thing I think will just be interesting is that a lot of these small liberal arts colleges, what a nice just physical space. Like if you think about people being able to move to small towns because they can work remotely, and there's these small liberal arts colleges with this nice grassy tree area and maybe some really low cost places to live because you could actually rent a dorm room with a shared bathroom, for less than a whole apartment. And you could have almost like instant friends, even if you're like 35 years old, but you live in some kind of communal situation on a liberal arts college that doesn't really exist anymore. So I think some of these physical assets will actually be repurposed in really interesting ways.
Yes, that's a great idea. And they have to do something because you'll never have to be concerned about your alma mater. I mean, the Harvards of the world are so well endowed. They will weather the storms.
Right.
They don't have to worry about justifying the ROI of an $80,000 liberal arts education per year because of their brand cachet. But what about a tier 2 or a tier 3 college or a small liberal arts college? They're going to have to make some pretty tough choices. Maybe Google will sweep in and start buying some of these campuses to train the people on their accelerated learning programs that have been announced. So we could see some massive upheaval there.
Right. I'm hoping that community colleges will be even more robust, though, because I think a lot of those they're much cheaper. My friend who teaches at a community college pointed out to me something I didn't even really know, which is they're actually really good. Like you get small classes, you have good teachers, they're not too far away from your home and they don't cost too much. And you can learn really applicable skills that can be applied instantly to a career. So I think I'm kind of bullish on that sector, actually.
Yes, lots of opportunity. I do also want to say we have a person from LinkedIn saying that they love the examples of agility. So let's maybe shift to talking about some lessons learned that leaders can apply in 2021. Whoever you are, tell us where you're from and maybe tell us what industry you're in. It would be fun to know for our own purposes. So, because Amanda and I are not short on any examples today.
Let's see if we get an answer back from them. In general, I will say that I think one thing we've learned is keep your eyes open. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, my friend who works at the CDC said that we were way overdue for a pandemic. And we go, yeah, of course we are,
Oh my gosh, they're prophetic.
you don't really plan for it. We really didn't plan for it. And so I think that keeping your eyes open, noticing the weak signals, um, staying in touch with diverse sources of information and listening, and staying in really close touch with your customers, really listening hard to your customers. And don't just listen to the ones that love you. Listen even harder to the people who are complaining, because the people who are complaining are usually those who are on the forefront of change. Something doesn't please them about what you're doing, and you need to figure out what it is. And it may be that they're way ahead of you on the innovation curve, and they're going to be just like this valuable resource for you to be able to understand how the market is changing and what you need to do to be prepared.
Yes, it also helps to expand your own repertoire of hobbies and activities.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine you have learned some great insights when you're out completely unplugged from work and kite surfing. What has kite surfing taught you in terms of making your own business more agile?
Well, one of the things I learned is when I started setting aside time to spend more time on the water, my business actually improved. And I think it was because having that time for your brain to just like go with the flow of nature, you can't think about much else. It's just like wave, 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 oh, wind, oh, wave, and so that just kind of resets your brain to be so much more creative. And I think I would come into meetings just so much more prepared by preparing less, which is really interesting. It makes you much more efficient, I think. And I'm sure with your swimming, you find the same thing, don't you? That there's just this like rhythm to it that kind of helps your brain just kind of calm down. It's like a meditation while you're moving, I would think. But what do you think?
Well, it feels that way for sure. The
Yeah.
best ones for me are open water as opposed to pool swimming. So
Uh-huh.
for now, I have to settle for pool swimming. But like when I was in the Greek islands last year with my dear friend Jamie, and we were out and we were swimming between islands, and it got really choppy. And the boat captain, who made it very clear that it was not a democracy, he was the boss. And he
Mhm.
said, if I notice that the weather shifts and it's dangerous, I'm
Mhm.
pulling you guys out.
Mhm.
So we were out there for about an hour and it got so choppy. I was really feeling my groove. And then he said, okay, everybody out. And it proved to me that, I was in the groove and I was ready to deal with the rough waves because I was in that rhythm of activity. So that I think anyone who's watching this, if there's one thing you take from this in terms of what to apply in 2021, is go find something to do that doesn't have anything to do with your career,
Yeah.
that really gives you joy and helps you find that flow, because the flow certainly informs and inspires the work that I do every day.
Right. Don't you just love that feeling of being in the ocean? Like just the it's just so cool.
Yeah, I was in Vermont this summer. I made it to Vermont, a little different than the Greek islands, but it was still phenomenal. Not as the waves aren't as heavy. It's not as
Mhm.
daunting to be out in a placid lake, but
Mhm.
it still gives me the inspiration and the spark of creativity I need to come back to work.
Mhm.
And I am much more intentional now about just scheduling time away to do my swimming or to plan absolutely nothing and
Yeah.
see what comes up.
Right.
Our visitor is from Washington, D.C. and in the healthcare industry. And they said, I'm seeing lots of opportunity to streamline testing and labs.
Oh, interesting. Well, testing certainly needs to be streamlined because we're having such slow tests that it's hard to respond to the pandemic, and numbers are really up today. So totally agree with that. But wow, what a great example that BioNTech and Pfizer, for instance, have set this year of getting a vaccine to market in 9 months or whatever, relative to 4.5 years being the fastest before. So that's really exciting.
It is so exciting that the whole behind the scenes activity of Operation Warp Speed has really been interesting to watch. In our Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches community, one of our members is Safi Bakal, and he wrote the book Loon Shots.
Oh yeah, I read that. Yeah.
And he's quite a leader. So he was CEO of a biotech company, but I think he's much more proud of just being able to have participated in all of those behind the scenes planning meetings with CEOs of competing pharma companies.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that those CEOs suspended their egos and their NDAs
Mm-hmm.
and said, look, we have a global pandemic, put that pride aside, pull out your best ideas, and let's get cracking. Is, to me, very inspiring.
And these vaccines are a totally different kind of thing than what we've had before. The messenger RNA, totally different technology, which is pretty neat.
Do you think, in retrospect, any of those pharma companies could have done what they did in isolation?
They had to partner. And I think the big companies needed the small companies to be able to, really bring the innovation to market. They couldn't have done it if there hadn't been a pandemic, that's for sure, because without a forcing function, they just wouldn't have. They would have been too careful. There's nothing like a crisis to make you a little less careful, but still just as smart. So I think it all worked out well.
Very interesting times, that's for sure. And speaking of trying new things, another organization I want to highlight is I know we've been talking a lot about B2C companies. I get a lot of questions from my clients. Well, we're not a B2C company, we're a B2B, we're different. I saw a lot of movement in a software company out of Charleston, South Carolina, Blackbaud.
Yeah.
And they are a B2B software company, and their primary audience are healthcare and education.
Mm-hmm.
Two industries facing massive disruption. And I just love what they did. And one of our guests was the CMO of Blackbaud, Catherine LaCour, and she was with us about a month and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And by the way, if anybody needs to listen to additional programs from us, just go to lisanirell.com/events, and you can certainly watch those replays. And what I loved about Catherine's executive team is that they said, okay, let's take a look at what our customers need right now. So right in the middle of the first quarter of the pandemic, they went out and they said to their business development reps, the BDRs, they said, okay, I know you're measured on number of phone calls, you're measured on how many deals you can get into the pipeline and how many marketing qualified leads you can throw over to sales. Mm-hmm. But for the foreseeable future, we are suspending those metrics. And we want you to spend your entire time calming down our customers and prospects, listen to their issues. I want you to cultivate empathy. And so I thought, wow, that took a lot of cojones, right?
Yeah, right.
Because they're publicly traded. So what ended up happening is I've been watching their quarterly performance, and they continue to win awards. Forbes Best Place to Work for women, one of the best innovative companies. Their recurring revenue still grew almost 4% during the pandemic, and their free cash flow, they were able to improve that by $10 million. And then they were able to host a virtual customer conference, and it broke all records. They had over 5,000 customers in the conference.
People can come to remote more easily than in person, and there's no cost to it, et cetera. So it's wonderful.
And so I look at those great leading indicators and I say, you're doing something right when yes, in the short term, we're going to do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
for the betterment of our customers. And look how it pays off. It just pays off.
Right. It does. That's a fantastic story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes. Oh, Catherine is a terrific leader too. And again, a courageous leader. Mm-hmm. And to me, you and I were bantering back and forth about, well, what's a winning company in 2020? What are the criteria for that? And I think we also have to ask, what's a winning leader? And a winning leader, you've got to have some courage and say, I might get fired over this, but I think it's what's right for the stakeholders.
Right. Right. Such a good point.
I just thought of that. See, 2 cups of Nespresso today will do it. And Novocaine.
If you're a good leader, if your employees are all motivated, engaged, excited, collaborating, trust each other, trust the company, are in good mental health, are having good relationships with their family, who they're stuck in a house now with, all of those things should be counted as wins.
Yes, they should. They absolutely should, because we're all in this for the long haul.
Yeah.
We're all in this for the long haul. What are you most excited about in your business for 2021? You've published books. You're found broadly across many great business publications. You have, for world-class clients. What's on the horizon for next year?
I'm really interested in this idea, and this may not be my big idea for 2021, but I'm just really fascinated by this idea that work should feel more like play. And for me, work does feel like play. Like, I love my work. I have always loved my work, no matter what my job is. Like, I was an engineer. I loved that. Then I was an executive with a high-tech startup. I loved that. Then I worked for McKinsey. I loved that. I have my own business. I love that. And I just wish that everybody could have that much joy from what they do. And I think many people do. But my interest is in figuring out how I can help leaders to help people have that feeling of engagement with their work. And so I've just been thinking a lot about that. And we can talk a little bit more about it if you want. But
is there another book in your future around that topic?
I think that might be a piece of it. I'll never stop writing about agility and strategy and things like that. But I think that this aspect of having your entire workforce feel like it's play makes you so much more agile.
I think we should get Cirque du Soleil performers or people from Blue Man Group or some people who know how to do this naturally. And I think improv comedy was probably one of the greatest investments I ever made in my business.
Well, so that's really interesting that you bring that up, because Cirque du Soleil, or even the improv people, that is their job. Their job is making it look like play. And so even the things that we do for fun and play, like you swimming between islands with huge waves crashing in your face, that's not like 100% fun. Like, there's hard parts of it too, right? I mean, even if it was 100% fun during the event, there's training, there's eating right, there's like all kinds of stuff that's not exactly delightful. So your play has elements of pleasure and pain. Your work has elements of pleasure and pain. But what I look at what people do for play, and it's got the same elements. They compete during their play. They compete during work. They communicate and influence during their play. They communicate and influence during their work. They create during their play. I mean, just think of all the people who are doing home improvement projects now. For some people, that's a job, that they're contractors or whatever. For other people, it's their play. So I think that the two are really, in many ways, indistinguishable. And we need to take that, we need to consider that and build it into how we construct our workplaces, how we construct our organizations, how we incent people, how we motivate them, how we help them know what they're supposed to be working on, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yes. Well, I look forward to hearing what unfolds there, Amanda. That would be really an interesting article articles, maybe to do what I do, write a few articles on it, test them out, see what kind of engagement you get.
Yeah.
And then voila, you have the foundation for your next book or online course or something else.
Right. I'll be off in about 10 minutes, Rob.
So I want to ask you where people can stay connected with you, Amanda, and learn more about your future projects.
LinkedIn is a great place to stay connected. I have a newsletter on LinkedIn that comes out about once a week. You can find me at setili.com, which is spelled phonetically SETILI.com. I love learning about the issues that people are facing, and love to engage via LinkedIn or call me if you have something to talk about.
That sounds perfect. Well, it'll be exciting to have you come back next year and tell us what kind of trouble you're starting. That's important because we're as advisors, we're a bit of troublemakers, right? We're shaking stuff up a little bit.
That's
and
good.
For those who have joined us late, remember Amanda's great books, Fearless Growth and The Agility Advantage. The Agility Advantage is a great way. It is a playbook to identify and act on opportunities during times of change. And the times they have changed.
Right.
So we're very glad you are here, Amanda. And I want to wish you and Rob and your family a fantastic and healthy holiday.
You too, Lisa.
And for those of you who have joined us late, I want to remind you that we have live streams 3 times a month, first 3 Fridays of the month. And next week, we're going to be hosting Megan Eisenberg. She is the Chief Marketing Officer of Trip Actions in the Bay Area. And she is not the CEO, but she's a seasoned board member. And once again, welcome to live streaming. Sometimes things do not always come across as perfect. And as Amanda pointed out so well, that you can't wait around for everything to be absolutely impeccable. Sometimes you got to just ship it. So on that note, I'm going to ship out of here and wish everyone a wonderful, healthy, and sane weekend ahead. And I hope to see you again December 11th. Bye for now.